Elegy for My Father, Part 2. David Paul LaMontagne, my father, was born in 1930 in Manchester, New Hampshire. Child of French-Canadian immigrants into the United States on both sides. And I mentioned how he spoke French at home until he got old enough to go to school. Thereafter he spoke increasingly English until he eventually spoke exclusively English. By the time I was a child, he could understand spoken French if he had to, if he paid attention, if he tried hard, but he couldn't speak it to speak of, not at all, or at least he never attempted to. He went to high school, I'm not sure where, I think maybe Bedford, where he was living with his mother at the time. While he was in high school, he got his pilot's license. In fact, he got his pilot's license before he got his driver's license. That pilot's license, in the old style, still exists under glass and belongs to my brother Marty. There was once a part of the family legend that said he got up and worked in a brickyard in the mornings before going to school to earn the money for his pilot's lessons. But when I mentioned that one to him, he denied it. But he didn't tell me what he did do to earn the money, although somehow it was understood he had to have some sort of side job to make money to pay for pilot's license. He wanted to fly. And when he got out of high school, he joined the Air Force. Now, of course, in those days, they were no bones made about it. If you needed any correction from glasses, you could not train as a pilot. If you needed any correction at all, you could not train as a pilot. They figured you're going to be in combat. They want you to be able to see clearly everything around you, especially all the dials and whatever's in your cockpit, and the things you need to see in the world around you where you're futzing around with other planes, without having to wear glasses. I'm not sure that's so strictly necessary now, but it was then. So even though Dad joined the Air Force, he did not train as a pilot at all. Instead, he ended up training as a radar and electronics technician for serving aboard a warplane, and eventually reached the rank of technical sergeant. He did a 4-year hitch from 48 to 52, working with electronics and radar on a B-36 bomber. The B-36 bomber was designed primarily, I think, to carry nuclear bombs. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone can look it up online, of course. It was a huge aircraft with a big wing spread and 6 engines. Now, they were prop-driven engines, but they were mounted so that they pushed backwards instead of pulling forward. They were mounted on the wing in that particular way. Makes the B-36 a distinctive-looking aircraft. My brother Marty has a photograph of one that he gave to my dad for a while, but you can see it. This plane was slow enough that even though it could fly to Alaska and back from Fort Worth, Texas, which is where my father was sent in his service with the Air Force, could fly to Alaska and back, reaching its fail-safe point on a run, a practice run in case the Russians attacked and we had to nuclear bomb them in return. And it was almost a 24-hour journey. The plane carried 3 full crews who took turns standing watch for one another in the whole course of the flying. So that was a lot of guys on board a plane like that, in order that it could carry, I believe, nuclear weapons, if I've understood the stories from then aright. My mother was at the Harris School of Nursing in Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. And through some means or another, someone hooked my mom and my father up for a possible date. Mom was from East Texas, from Longview, Texas, and there are lots of stories about her that fit into another place, and I will tell them to you someday. But someone arranged for a date between Mom and Dad, and Dad had a scramble mission. They used to run these fake practice missions where you would get no notice, like you would expect to get perhaps in time of war, and boom, have to go. So the date was already arranged when the practice mission happened, and that meant that Dad got back for the date just fine, but having had no meaningful amount of sleep in the previous 24 hours. A couple of snoozes here and there. I don't know, young men in an airplane stay up all night talking rather than get what sleep they need, I guess. So Dad was rather sleepy on this date, and the family legend is, and it's been told in the presence of both my father and my mother, and neither of them ever denied it, that in the course of this date, my dad fell asleep at least 2, maybe 3 times during what went on in the date. I don't know if it was a double date or not. The context of the story makes double date quite possible, but there's nothing specific to say so. But in any case, my father reported that when he got back to his barracks, he told his barracks mate that he'd met the girl he was going to marry. And my mother, when she got back to her dorm at the nursing school, told her roommate or some of her dormitory mates that she'd met the boy she was going to marry. In fact, just recently my mom said to me that of all the boys she dated, and she dated some boys while she was in high school, he was the kindest and most considerate of all of them. So there we have this family legend that they identified one another for marriage at, if not first sight, within 3 hours thereof. So that's pretty meaningful. Don't know if it's a family pattern, but the possibility always lingers on. And it may have been a product of what I think was my dad's determination to have a family and do it right. To have a family and do it right and not screw it up. It was something he was determined to attempt to do. So, my dad and my mom got married. The amusing story about that is that they were engaged to be married while Dad was still in the Air Force. Mom was still in nursing school, I think. And they had a summer wedding scheduled for 1951, I think. And they used to go on double dates with another girl named Clyde and her boyfriend that she was engaged to. Clyde was the nickname of the girl in the couple, and Clyde was a friend of my mother's, either from, I think, from nursing school. So they would go out to drive-in movies. My grandkids, my father's great-grandkids, may not know what a drive-in movie is or was. There used to be theaters where you could go to watch the movies by sitting in your car. And the cars would all be pulled up in rows, and the movie would be projected on a huge screen, and you'd have a speaker that you hang on the window of your car. People used to watch movies those ways as a kind of theater, because no one watched movies at home. And if you were in your own car, you could have snacks, you could fix dinner ahead of time and bring it, you could smooch with your wife, or your girlfriend if that's where you were at. It was a comfortable way to go to movies. So, my mom and dad used to double date to the drive-in movies with Clyde and her intended. And my dad would sometimes jokingly say when the movie was over, hey Clyde, you want to go to Arkansas and get married? Was it Arkansas? I think it was Arkansas. Another state that they could go to fairly readily, it could have been Oklahoma from where they were located in Fort Worth, but I think it was Arkansas, where you could walk in and get married like you can now in Vegas, with just a couple hours paperwork, at the most, and maybe even not that much. And Clyde would always say no, 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 because her daddy was a minister, and her daddy was going to perform her wedding ceremony. And she was holding out for that. So the legend is that one time, I think there was a third couple along, the line was exchanged, "Hey Clyde, shall we all go to Arkansas and get married?" And Clyde did not object. And no one objected. And so in fact all three couples went over the state line and got married. And then I think both couples, Clyde and her new husband, and certainly my mom and dad, got cold feet and did not tell their families that they had already gone and gotten married. Now, I don't know whether they lived together in the interim or not. That seems a little bit extreme as a way to keep up an illusion, but as I say, family legend doesn't tell. And went through with the big church weddings for the summer that they had planned. So my mom was married to my dad for about a year while he was in the Air Force. I'd have to look up his discharge documents, but I think he might have been discharged a month or so before I was born, but certainly after he was married. And I think that will be the end of part 2.